of women who are like, yeah, sure, I'll marry a dude who makes $150,000 a year and pays for all my shit. That sounds a lot different than I'm looking to get married. To me,
Who said that?
That sounds different.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I'm curious which one of us said that.
Well, so as we're going around the table, right, what do you think that when you say a man who can support himself and is supporting himself and can support a family, if he lives in the Santa Barbara area, what do you think that would take if you had to guess?
Probably over $300,000 a year, but we're not talking about this specific location. We're not including the fact that each of us are, I think everyone around the table is willing to have a 2-income household. Do you agree or do you disagree? I think partnership is everything. My dad and my stepmom, my dad is 16 years older than my stepmom. They've been together for 18 years now. He invested in her company and now she makes more money than him and she's the main provider of our household. I think
so
that
he gave her money for her company and now her
and she's paid it all back. Her company is doing much better, or it's doing well, I mean, and now she makes more money than him and pays his mortgage. And she's also helping me pay for my college. So women can
that's great.
be providers.
That's called dividends. That's called dividends. That's how that works when you invest in a company and it does well. You get money back out of it. That's
Absolutely,
how it works.
But she is a female.
He could have done that without any marriage, right?
Yeah, but I think if you find a partner who's willing to work with you and grow with you and create a sustainable life for you and a future family, I think that's an absolutely beautiful thing for both partners to have ambition. And also, I would be perfectly happy, marrying a woman who makes more money than me or less money than me, or marrying a man who makes more money than me or less money than me, as long as in our combined household we can ensure the safety of one another and we both have similar mindsets with financial planning, investments, retirement funds, college funds if we are planning to have children, Roth IRAs, that type of issue.
What about the love thing? Is that the most important factor, or the money
for
thing?
marriage?
Absolutely.
Love for marriage, is that more important than money? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Nothing in life is free. If you marry someone for the money, you earn every penny. That's what my mom would tell me when I was a kid.
I'm sure she would.
So it would be money. That's
no. The point is that if you marry someone for the money, you earn every penny because you choose a life of unhappiness.
Yeah.
I think that was the lesson she always taught me. You have to be open-minded, Not everything in life is material. And I think because there are so many ways to make money independently, and I mean, for example, writing your own book and creating your own platform, I think there's less of a necessity for women to marry solely for money, when in the past and not that long ago, we couldn't even have our own credit cards, without the permission of a man.
Yeah, but you also didn't incur any debt. That's why you couldn't have credit cards.
Yeah, but we were owned property by men.
No, you weren't owned property. That's ridiculous.
There's not a point in human history where women have been property of men.
That's not what I said. I said you weren't owned property in this country, ever.
Me personally, no, but...
No women. Women were not.
In the United States, women were never considered legal property of another person.
But if you're don't have body autonomy and you can't make your own income, and you have to rely on being married in order to have any type of social standing.
Women could always make their own income in the United States. Where on earth did you get the idea that they couldn't?
Guys,
did you learn this in feminist studies class 101?
But white women, were not really accepted into the working class.
If you want to argue, I'm not saying there was no room for income and that there was no room for any type of sustainable life or women to, create some type of wealth. Until really wartime, women weren't allowed in the workforce, and that was only because there were no men.
Where did you get the idea
where in the workforce were they not allowed?
They were still nurses, they were still teachers,
Guys,
they were still doing all sorts of jobs inside of society. What do you mean?
They were limited
Same types
to
of jobs
domestic
they're doing right now,
role
by the way.
laws.
They were doing hang on, just calm down, relax. They were doing clerical work, they were teaching, they were nursing, they were doing all the same jobs that they're basically doing right now.
Okay, well, there are plenty of women who are moving up in corporate worlds as well as moving up in different sections of
No, there's not very many women who are moving up the corporate ladder in
compared
corporate world.
to
Why
50
there's
years ago?
There's so few female CEOs for a reason. They don't gravitate towards that kind of work.
Okay. You're right, I'm wrong. Women are they are only meant to do domestic work.
No, I don't. I don't think that's what he's saying.
That's not what I said. That's a mischaracterization. I'm just explaining to you the reality. I don't understand why you're being so aggressive. I haven't been mean to you.
Can I
I'm just
ask
explaining
something?
to you.
Yeah, go for it.
What the reality of the situation is.
Go ahead, and then Isabel will go. Go ahead.
What does this have to do with women not being able to own, like, have their own credit cards or open a bank account in their own
Well,
name?
because women not being able to have bank accounts and credit cards because they weren't allowed to incur debt. This was great because right now the biggest holders of debt in the United States are women. It's crushing for most women. Before that, men had to incur all the debt. So the wife could go out and spend all of the money that she wanted in her husband's name, and he had to incur the debt even post-divorce. He still had to take care of the debt. She had none of it in her name. This was one of the primary arguments against feminism from the anti-suffragettes, is that they did not want to incur debt. And now women have racked up tons and tons of it.
I mean, so have men. It's crushing for men too. So I mean, I don't really think anyone should be forced to incur debt. So I'm not sure why.
Well, you know what? I think that if I asked a man if he got married, if all of the debt would be incurred by the woman and all he had to do was not have a credit card or bank account, I'd take that deal in 5 seconds.
What do you mean by not be forced to incur any debt?
It means that everything that all money that I spend on
Grid
all
One
credit cards go
Motorsports
immediately into your
donated
name.
$200. In 1877, a woman was elected mayor in Kansas. Your history sucks. Accuracy matters. You are in fact wrong. Feminism has failed you. Patriarchy is the way to the truth, and stands ready to help be better.
Yo, Grid One, thank you. You had a question for her.
Yeah, I
you
just wanted to get some clarification there. Nobody should be forced to incur debt. What does that mean?
Just like in a purely hypothetical, like perfect world, no one would be taking on debt to like go to college.
Well, let's talk about the real world.
Okay. In the real world, I mean, that's not possible.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it should. I mean, basically, you're implying that it's good that it's men's responsibility to incur all debt. And I feel like if that were actually the case, then we would be in a different argument where it would be like, well, women suck because women don't incur any debt and we incur all of their debt. So I feel like it's just kind of like a bad faith argument. I don't know.
Well, it's not a bad faith argument. It's just giving a descriptor for why it happened that way. Sure. Why it was that women, and there was far more anti-suffragettes than there were pro-suffragettes, by the way, made very compelling arguments, like they didn't want to get drafted, for instance. They didn't want, see, what the anti-suffragettes said was that women had the moral high ground because they weren't political tools. They weren't political tools because they couldn't vote. So they weren't tapped into as being political tools. So when they said something, they said it from a position of moral authority. They weren't being tapped into. So this is how they were able to argue successfully for things in women's interests without being just considered another voting bloc that needed to be appealed to. When it came to debt and things like this, it is true that women didn't hold they could have bank accounts, by the way, but most of the time when they opened up lines of credit and debt and accounts, it was always in their husband's name, but the husband was also responsible for all of the debt. The women weren't. And even when the man died, the woman would get his property, but it may not be the same if a woman died, that he would automatically default and get the property. She was able to incur all sorts of wealth for herself and didn't have to spend it.
Do you think that's a more preferable system? Would you like to go back to that financial?
Well, I think it's a more preferable system to begin to move women outside of the workplace. That way we can go back to a family dynamic that works and we can get the reproductive health of the United States back up, because right now it's in the gutter. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's in the gutter.
So
our birth rate's way low.
Then why would it be a problem for any of us to say we'd like a man who can support a family? Why is that a problem if you think that men should be incurring all the debt and taking on all the financial responsibility? If a woman says, well, I'd like a man who can support a family in Santa Barbara,
well, because
why is that a problem?
this is a cyclical problem. So the problem is if you say, I would love to have a single income support me, but then at the same time not recognize the problem that if you double the workforce, you're going to have the wages of men, that you're basically perpetuating the same issue that you're against.
Jump in.
I think it's...
Last thing after you make your point.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Say your thing, but I'm going to move on after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just think for me, it's kind of the constant dichotomy of men constantly arguing, oh, well, women want men to pay for everything and want us to take care of them. But then it's also the idea of, oh, well, women can't do any jobs that aren't nursing or being a teacher or doing all these things naturally in the workforce, because women, whether or not you want to argue these aspects of history, on a mass scale entered the workforce at a later date. The same thing with how women entered professional sports at a later date, or any other kind of gendered aspect of life, which is most of society. You're welcome to interject.
Well, really quick on the professional sports thing. So what exactly, when you bring up professional sports,
Sure.
do you mean because women got into professional sports at a later date, that's the reason why there's like a pay discrepancy in
No,
sporting
I think
events?
of course there's a pay discrepancy in sporting events based off of turnout and these other things,
Okay.
but I'm saying there's no foundation of growth. If you are able to acquire wealth and work jobs for hundreds of years, whether it is, or decades, whether it's being a doctor, whether it's being a lawyer, and these institutions only existed under the guidance of men being able to do those things, such as Harvard only being a male-only school until the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, but
my
wait, no,
I'm still
no,
talking.
No. Stop.
Thank you.
That's ridiculous.
Oh,
When
it
comes
is
to
not,
college
because my
especially,
grandmother
women
went to
have
the
always,
sister.
Hang on. Women have always outdone men academically, including in high school. They've always had better scores. Always. That has been the case. And there was no barrier for public education. Early feminists were flying all over the world. They were writing books, they were writing pamphlets, they were writing essays, and they were highly educated.
100%.
No men were pushing them out of those domains of academia.
I think I hear you, and I understand that that's your perspective, and I want to acknowledge
not.
that
It's
there
just
are
the
so
truth.
there are so many smart, scholarly women, but it is an absolute reality that women's work has been discredited. I can cite I
That's all
studied biological
standpoint theory
anthropology.
nonsense. What woman's
I
work was
studied-
discredited because
Look
she was
up
a
look up
woman?
when women were allowed to attend Harvard University for me quickly.
Yeah, why? But who
No, no,
cares
no,
if that
no,
was
no, no, no.
exclusive? There was tons of
Look
other
up-
universities for them to attend
If
to. And what is the
prestigious
problem with having a
universities-
male-only college anyway? If somebody wants
If
to have one,
prestigious universities catered exclusively to men and women
what?
entered these different aspects of the workforce later, it will take more
No,
time
that's not what happened.
and
You're full of
gradual
shit.
project. It will take gradual progress for women to continue to be in those fields of study. Are there probably statistically in the US more male chemists or lawyers? At UCSB, for example, the majority of professors on the panel of the chemistry department are white men. But does that
That's
mean in the
because
next
women
20
suck
years?
at applied science.
Why?
That's why they all get
Tell
sociology
me the science.
degrees.
Tell
That's
me
why
the
they're all in
science.
sociology
Tell me the
and they're in
science of
fake
why men
scientific
perform
fields.
higher in chemistry.
Look,
because I
at some point you
guarantee.
gotta let me respond.
No, go
because-
ahead. Tell me
because
the
what you're doing
statistics.
is you talk so much. I can't actually
Okay,
go
tell me
point
the
by point with
statistics
you.
of how men perform
So
higher
I'll
in
try
chemistry.
to go point by point. Let's go with point one.
Sure.
Yes, it is true that when you're talking about scientific fields, especially chemistry, that's an applied science. Women don't go for applied science. They
That's
don't
actually
prefer it.
that's
They-
actually not entirely
they-
true.
they
Women
go-
make
they
up
go-
the
hang on,
majority
hang
of
on,
STEM
hang on. Let me
degrees
finish.
today.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Okay, calm down. Soft sciences are preferable by women. They prefer soft science. I don't know why, right? Nobody knows why. Well, I mean, we have an inkling as to why, but they don't. They don't prefer it. The hard sciences are preferred by men. That's why you see mostly men inside of hard science fields. That is true.
Yeah, so
that's
as
point
of,
one.
As of recently, the majority of STEM degrees actually are being pursued by women. I think a lot of that can be attributed to the modern cultural feminism movement at
Well,
large.
no. The
period.
devil's in the details. What kind of STEM degrees?
Largely the sciences. I have a degree,
What
2 degrees
kind
actually, in
sciences?
biomedical sciences, one in
what
undergrad
kind, yeah.
and one in
Are they
graduate
going-
school.
What about engineering?
But correct, women statistically make up less of engineering programs until
Yeah, so
recently.
when it
Women
comes- when it
women
comes-
are
yeah.
becoming a much larger
Yeah, just saying
growing
it's a STEM
demographic in
field,
these things. But this is my
just-
my question
Okay,
is
hang on. Just saying it's a STEM field is not relevant. For instance, if you look at the replication crisis, you'll note that it's not just sociology which it affects, but the medical field as well. Medical fields are full of STEM degrees. However, it's not always replicatable science. It fails up to 60% of the time, for instance. That's still a
Grid
soft
One
science.
Motorsports
Just saying
donated
that it's a STEM field
$200.
doesn't mean anything.
A.
Yeah.
The stupid in you must really hurt.
It wasn't
Men
Brown.
went to Harvard or Yale, which
It
were
wasn't
male
Brown
only.
University at the
Women
time.
went to Brown and others. Brown was all female. Are you trying to be this stupid?
anyway, my question is, we can talk about men generally having more analytically structured brains, and that's why they've pursued applied sciences larger than the soft sciences, which women generally have pursued out of a more empathetic, emotional perspective historically, and they still do tend to pursue those career paths. I guess my question for you, Luce, is if women have been strategically held back for so long by society, if they've, in your own words, taken so much extra time to be admitted to schools like Harvard or to be given professional athletic opportunities, etc., we could keep going example by example, then what's the solution? Are you just saying women are always going to be considered, in your worldview, second-class citizens, or is there a change that needs to happen, in your perspective, societally to accomplish that?
I'm not saying that women are second-class citizens in the United States, and I'm not saying that in my personal experience I've felt second-class to anyone. I acknowledge certain privileges that I've had and the ability to pursue education, etc. But I do absolutely think when there is a woman expectation, for example, when my dad left my mom, she became a stay-at-home single mother, and she was living off of alimony and child support. But she needed to be taking care of 2 kids in the home at that time, and the court kind of put that onto her. My dad did not want custody, and I think very often women are forced into positions of nurturing and caring for, whether it's their partners, their children, etc. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or a wrong thing, and I'm not saying that, I personally do feel like I do have some level of a nurturing or more maternal aspect to me that maybe a man might not have. But I think it's very hard to succeed in your career for many women who don't have the socioeconomic standing or certain privileges to pursue those fields without, the consequence of having to take care of, whether it's younger siblings or their own children, or being forced into positions of choosing career versus family. I think, is anyone familiar with the poet Sylvia Plath?
Oh yeah,
Well,
I'm very
she
familiar. Sylvia Plath. Do you know how Sylvia Plath met her demise?
I do, and my point is, she writes a.
Tell them how
she
Sylvia
committed
Plath met
suicide,
her
and
demise.
she wasn't necessarily. Oh, excuse
Whatever,
me.
just continue.
Sorry. She wasn't necessarily the greatest person in the world, but she did write a poem.
No, she really wasn't, was she? She was pretty awful, wasn't she?
She was awful, but she did write a discussion about a poem called One Fig Tree. And she basically discusses how, as a woman, she felt like she had 3 paths in life: a famous poet, a mother with a good husband and good children, or a scholarly professor. And I think that's a choice that women are often expected to choose, is family, career, hobbies, whereas men often get the immediate option of choosing career. And that's not necessarily to say all men want that. But I do think women are asked to sacrifice
she
more
also drew pictures
socially.
of aborted fetuses, and she also wrote poems about
Cry Me a
unaliving.
River.
She also wrote all kinds of insane poems. She was a lunatic.
But she's is she a lunatic any more than any crazy
Than any
artist?
of the feminists? No, she's not any more of a lunatic than any of them.
She was actually
That's
a
true.
self-proclaimed not feminist, so do not associate her with that
She
movement.
is a feminist, and her husband was a feminist and supported all of her work with his money because he was a feminist. He propagated
very
the
problematic,
feminist
actually.
agenda.
But my point is that I think a lot of women are asked to sacrifice more individually than men are on a career scale or on a family scale.
Bullshit.
Nuclear family, for example.
What?
So
How are they
what
asked
about
to
the nuclear
sacrifice
family
more?
is asking women to sacrifice things that the men isn't?
How many men do you know that were ever stay-at-home dads?
My dad, for one, for several years of my childhood.
Statistically, huh?
No.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just saying there is an expectation on women, from whether it's a natural perspective or an evolved perspective. Women bear children for a duration of 9 to 10 months. They have to take care of them biologically post-birth, whether it's through breastfeeding or other acquisitions. And I think because of those biological factors, we have been forced more into the nurturing role in a social sphere as well.
Wait.
That's a
You've been
powerful
forced
word. Forced is a really powerful
Wait,
word.
hold on. Can you just repeat? You said that how many men do you know who
Who were stay-at-home dads versus
Grid
stay-at-home
1
moms.
Motorsports
I'll get to that
donated
in just a sec.
$200. If you think it is easy to be a man, read Self-Made Man by Nora Vincent. Your little mind will
it's easy to be
explode.
a man.
Your simplistic arguments insult literally everyone watching this program. Let the adults talk.
For those who don't know, Nora Vincent, a woman who did this like kind of experiment where she basically lived as a man. I don't think she was transgender, but she dressed like a man, looked like a man, lived like a man. And she was like, because she's a feminist, oh, this is going to be so easy, blah, 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 all this privilege. And then actually it was just totally brutal, like the social
100%.
aspects of it. But you were saying something about, well, how many men do you know who would
I
be
think
stay-at-home?
agreed, but to your point, I think it is very hard to be a man the same way it's very hard to be a woman, the same way it's very hard to be a human being. No part of my argument was saying that it's not
What's
difficult.
the thing with the stay-at-home parent, though?
I just think statistically, until very recently, it was significantly less likely that men would be stay-at-home parents, as well as the failure of our career system not allowing men to take paternal leave.
Well, do you think that there's just, I would argue that there's, like, who would you say is to blame for that? That, like, men just, don't want to
I'm not
be-
blaming anyone. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying it is a natural part of our society that women have been not forced, excuse me.
Yeah.
You're right with that language.
Didn't you earlier say that you want a guy to pay for the first date?
If he asks me out, if I ask him out, I'm happy to pay.
Do you ask guys out?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
In the
Generally
past, for sure.
speaking, do you think who's initiating first dates?
Obviously, men,
I would
probably
argue
statistically.
99% of first dates, men are the ones initiating.
I don't know. Men are kind of scared these days, so
Well,
I would
we have-
say
That is interesting.
I would say it's fairly
agree.
even. But all I was saying that because of the actual biological factor of being a childbearing woman, not that all women are, I think there is a standard in our society that women are these nurturing roles, and that reflects in the careers that you proclaim that women
But
succeed
hold on,
the
I'm
most
going back
in.
to this. You stated something
Yeah, but
about.
I mean, why-
Hold on.
but why is that?
You
Okay.
stated something about. Well, men, they wouldn't be these stay-at-home fathers. Well, that's a mating.
didn't say
hold
that.
on. You said something about.
I didn't.
Then restate it for me.
I'm saying
Something about the stay-at-home
when you
fathers.
consider the fact that even if you look in the court of law, even when the mother is the unfit parent, the court of law in a divorce case will always favor the woman getting custody.
Sounds like a female privilege, doesn't it?
I mean, if having to deal with kids, 3 screaming children on your own is a privilege to you, maybe. But I think that aspect
Why are
of
they in
female
court?
privilege was created by
If there's
the
a
patriarchy.
custody dispute,
Sure.
somebody's desirous of having custody.
Sure.
So let's assume that it's the man who's desiring custody and the woman doesn't want it. That wouldn't be a male privilege that he doesn't get custody.
Why do you think I'm saying male privilege or female privilege? I'm saying objectively in the court of law they favor
Yeah.
women, and that's a negative a lot of the time for men who want to participate in parenting. I think women are looked at as mothers in society, and that's not necessarily always true and not necessarily
And men are
always
looked
fair.
at as wallets
Okay.
and providers and
Oh,
disposable.
that's terrible. I'm sorry
and
that that's been your
disposable.
experience. I'm not saying one is worse than the other
Cool.
or one's
But
untrue.
you said something. I'm trying to get back to the original point. You said something about single stay-at-home fathers.
Yeah.
What was your argument?
I was just stating that there are less stay-at-home fathers, as well as
And
the
that's-
failure of our career system that does not allow a lot of men to take.
That's because of a mating pressure that women put on men, not because there's that's entirely a mating pressure that women impose on men. We went around this table. All of you said the guy has to make this much money. He has to pay for the first date, blah, blah, blah. That's a mating pressure you impose.
I mean, I've
It has
dated
nothing to do
people
with
from
patriarchy.
multiple different. I think it's difficult to argue that, oh, well, this has nothing to do with this, and this is the only reason that this is aligned, and this is the only problem. Like, none of us are arguing that men don't have problems in dating. I'm not saying that it's ethical that men are expected to be providers, but when you create a system in which there is a historical aspect where women were meant to provide children and
They still
essentially
are.
sex to men,
Yeah,
a
but
man
it's still the
provides his
system.
own service. That is his
Listen,
service of
listen,
taking
hang on,
care
hang
of
on.
his family.
That system, what's wrong with that system? That's a good system. We need women to provide children. Nobody
Not
else
ev-
can
I
provide
mean,
children except women.
We're in overpopulation.
Actually,
already.
we're not. We are approaching population decline
Yeah,
like,
they're
rapidly
massive.
around
We're
the
in
globe
decline
today.
across the board. Not only are we in decline across the board, but if you look at some of the Asian nations like South Korea, for instance, it's not even 1-to-1 for replacement. If you
Yeah.
look at Japan, right now, they're about to have a crisis where they have more elderly people than they have young people to take care of the elderly people.
The
This is
50
a
most
cataclysm
powerful
which is
countries in the
coming.
world actually cannot replace their current population. The
So my
50
question
most
becomes
powerful
this to
countries.
you, right? My question becomes, why is this a bad system? Why do you think that it's bad that women are moved by society to stay at home and take care of their children? Why do you think that that's bad? That seems to be the most efficient system. Could you even think of a better system?
I
Like,
mean-
tell me, if you could come up with your dream system, what would it even be other than that?
My dream sis, I can't wait to have children. I love children. Personally, it's never been a question for me. I can't wait to have children. I love children. I work with kids a bunch, and like I think it's such a great blessing, motherhood. Not that everyone needs it, but for me personally. So I'm not at all anti-children, but I'm just I personally would love to have a family and have that dynamic.
So you actually can't
But-
think of a better system than that.
In my ideal world, I would love to have a partner who would go true 50-50 with me on caring for the children as well as working as much as I work. Obviously,
Well,
if my
I mean,
partner,
if he's working, but if you had the ideal system, wouldn't your ideal system actually be that you could spend all of your time with your children
No.
while your husband worked?
because I would like the equal sacrifice in my relationship where I love children. I can't wait to be a mother, but I don't need to be the sole provider of my children for 24 hours a day. I would love to have a partnership where they are more than willing to help me, feed, take care of the children if I need a day.
Yeah, but
where
how's that
I'm-
equal if he's working?
Because I could work as well. There's so many
Yeah, I
different
know,
ways.
so this brings us back to the original question then. Is your time better spent working, or is your time better spent at home with your children, not outsourcing their care to somebody else while you're working? For instance, let's say you had a baby, little Samantha. Do you think that little Samantha wants to go and get taken care of by some Venezuelan immigrant while you go work all day? Do you think that that's preferable?
I had an au pair growing up. She was a Haitian au pair, and she was one of the most beautiful, amazing women. And I never felt like it took away from my experience with my
You
mother.
preferred that over your mom?
I never felt like it took away from my experience with
That's
my
not
mother.
what I asked you. Did you prefer it over your own mother?
Probably.
Really? You preferred that this
My
this
mother.
other person
Not
took
every
care of you
woman
instead
is
of
a
your
great
own mother?
mother. Not every woman can be a great mother. Not every man can be a great father. And I think the
So
family
outsource
system.
them. So outsource your kids.
You don't have
That's
to.
your big plan.
If I am in a position in which I can adjust work hours or take time off of work or make sure my schedule aligns, or take off work until my children are in school and only work during school hours, etc., I find that to be not a problem at all.
Andrew, can
Yeah,
you
I know.
center?
I understand what you're saying, but let me give it back to you one more time. Why do you think it would be
Thank you,
preferable
Sean.
if you had the option to stay at home to outsource your mothering to a stranger of your children? In what world does that make sense?
I'm not saying that I would have to do it to a stranger of my children. Everyone has different relationship dynamics, different financial statuses. Maybe I have my parents are able to help take care, or my sister, which is a very natural part
Or
of
maybe
human.
nobody. Or maybe the daycare, right?
Or-
Don't you
no,
think
I
it's
would never
preferable
set-
for the
personally,
women
I would
then
never set-
to avoid the daycare?
If you want to ask the question and you want my answer, do you want me to answer? or
Well,
no?
your answers are really long-winded. You see how
Okay,
short
fine.
and
I
sweet
will. I will
make
do
it?
short and sweet. I will do short and sweet.
Good.
I want to love my children in every way that I can, and I want to be an amazing mother. And I think if I spend my entire time losing my identity as an individual and only seeing myself as a mother, I will not be able to
What do you mean
provide.
only? Wait, what could possibly be more important than being a mother? There's nothing you could ever do in your life that's more important.
So for
than
a
that.
man, it's
Name
more
one
important for
thing
him
you
to
could
be a
do that's
father.
more important than being a mother.
God, being a good one.
That makes no what? That makes no sense.
That makes sense.
That
to
makes
me.
so much sense.
What?
That makes complete sense.
Also, I might be
You have to be-
misunderstanding the conversation, but also
Wait, hang on. I just want to make sure I got this right. What's more important than being a mother? Okay, being a good mother. Okay, great. What's more important than being a good mother?
Nothing. And
Nothing.
I
So
will,
then
I will,
being a good mother,
I will
if
take
nothing's more
every
important
step
than
in my
that-
life to assure that I can be a good mother, whether that's working, whether that's
Yeah,
maybe
by
needing a
outsourcing
nanny.
it to the Venezuelan immigrant. Yeah, your daycare.
What's wrong with a
Genius-
Venezuelan
genius
immigrant?
plan.
Maybe
Can I-
she lives at home with me and she's
Can
an
I
amazing
ask-
woman.
I mean, do you consider yourself, is his name Andrew?
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, do you consider yourself like a traditional person? Like, would you say that a traditional mindset
No,
is
I
being
don't
a
consider
traditional
myself
family?
trad or what is considered to be trad in modernity at all. I never have. I don't think we should go back to the 1950s or any of this nonsense. What I'm saying specifically, though, is this, that there is no better system that any of you can name than the nuclear family for the backbone of society. That's going to require stay-at-home mothers. There's nothing else that's better than that. We see the population declining. It's falling off like a rock.
Well-
And so when I ask, what is it that's more important than being a good mother at home, none of you are going to be able to say that that's not the most important job. And yet, for some reason, women seem to want to outsource that job to other people, even though it's theirs. Husband can work, take care of you, you stay home. No, I have aspiring dreams that surmount being a mother when there's nothing else you could do that's more important than that.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ideal dynamic would be subjective to the two people in that dynamic. And
Andrew,
I think
can you
it's-
try to center yourself? Go ahead.
I think it's silly to try and tell other people in these relationships what to do because it's not your relationship. You don't know what's best for them. We don't know what's best in your relationship, Andrew. We shouldn't.
We're
be
not.
telling you
We're
what
not
to do.
saying what. Listen, I'm not talking on the individual level. Everybody's individual situation is going to be different. Nobody disputes that that's true. But we can look at what is optimal.
So
and if
what
we're
if
looking at
someone
what is
has-
optimal for the most amount of people, what's optimal for the most amount of people is having a stay-at-home mom who takes care of their children and a father who works. How do we know that that's optimal? Because we can look at the results of the kids and what happens with the kids
Let's
when they come
say-
from single mother households, when they come from split family households. We can see exactly what happens, and it is not preferable to society in any way, shape, or form.
Let's say it's optimal and best for the child, for the parents to have a dynamic that works best for them where they can healthily show up for their kid the best way they can, whether it or not it be like a woman in the household taking care of the children or a father in the household taking care of the children. It doesn't really matter. Like what works best for
Yeah,
them
you
is what works
could,
best
you
for
could
them.
in some certain circumstances flip the script. That's true.
it's, like,
but these
personally
would be
objective.
exceptions to the rule.
It's a
so, for
personal
instance,
preference.
it's going to be optimal for a mom to stay at home over a dad, at least in the formative years of the child, right? She has to breastfeed. She has to do all of these things which are necessary for the health
Living
and the
on
welfare of the child. So it's an
donated
optimal system.
$200. Question for first girl. How often do you advocate for male-only scholarships, fostering male educational environment, etc.? Why are feminists not pushing for graduation parity now? I never hear it now.
Isn't it the case? What is the disparity? It's like 2 to 3, 3 to 2. Like 60% of women are going to college versus 40%. Like it's 60-40, I think, is the split. You go to UCSB, correct?
Correct.
I think it's 60-40 at UCSB. What do you have to say about that? Is that due to sexism?
I think that is really terrible and that everyone should
Do
have.
you?
Yeah, I think everyone should have full access and opportunity for education. Absolutely every person on this planet, whether or not I agree with them, whether they have different political
Yeah.
views than me, any gender, race, everyone has the right to education. And our entire American education system is flawed. It's super expensive. There's a lot of pressure to get straight into the workforce. I think as we're talking about these different nuclear family dynamics, there is extra pressure on men to get straight into the workforce. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that,
Well, I don't know
Yeah,
who's
I
going to
wish-
run all the infrastructure in society if we don't get young men out there in the workforce building all the infrastructure in society, because women aren't doing that. Men are doing that.
okay.
I think there's like a really big phenomenon happening today too, where there are a lot of depressed men that aren't really, it's not really being talked about.
Absolutely.
So I think that could also be a driving factor to the gender disparity of people attending college and universities.
Let me get a couple chats here. Pilvia Slath was absolutely shocked to see Luce. How do you say your name? Sorry, Luce. When I hopped in tonight, I love your poetry. Anyways, big fan of the podcast, Brian. Let's have a clean show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Good stuff, Luce. JJ.
Oh, thanks, JJ.
Someone said something nice to you. There you have it. We have the Nordic Catholic. For the ladies, what do you think of men in the nursing field, and is it okay for a man to be a nurse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great career.
Of course.
It's actually more competitive to get into nursing school
Grid
than
One
med school right now. It's
Motorsports
crazy.
donated $200. Andrew is right, you should listen. If each of you were to die tomorrow and come back as a baby, would you rather have a nanny raise you, a daycare, or your loving mother? Feel free to
Quick
go
answers.
round.
Quick
Well,
answers.
according to her, she thought it was better to be raised by somebody other than her mother. That's what she said
I had a
already.
mother who was not a good mother, personally. And my dad is an amazing person. My stepmom's an amazing person. So I think all family dynamics are different.
I agree. It's also subjective.
Don't you
My-
think maybe one of the reasons your mom wasn't such a great mom is because she outsourced how you were raised to a stranger?
No, I don't. Thank God she did, because I don't think I'd be here.
Word.
As I was saying, I agree. It's subjective. If a mother is unfit, I would prefer a nanny.
I love my mom.
I would also love a loving mother to raise me, but also not all mothers are good mothers, like she's saying.
Private chat, Nick, pull that shit up.
Loving mother.
Yeah, my mom.
As a professional nanny, I have seen that the parents are more important, and it probably does damage some of the kids because they become more attached to me than to their parents, and I feel like that's definitely going to give them abandonment problems when they're older. 'Cause I majored in psychology, and I think that some of the kids I have watched became more attached to me than to their mother, which was very sad, especially when I'm only there for a year or two, and I mainly watch infants, so they are very attached to me instead of their parents. And their parents are good parents, but they're not around their child as much as I'm around their child.
No. There's so many bad mothers that we have to outsource all of the children to nannies and other people because mothers are apparently psychopaths who don't love their children
Yeah,
enough.
what if
that
the
only
parents-
sounds moderately insane to me. I don't think it's true at all, but just my 2 cents.
Well, it's real. What if the parents have mental illness?
Yeah,
They
okay,
can't
hold
be
on.
there
You
for
can't
the
look at the
kid.
exceptions to all the rules and then make policy for society based on exceptions.
But
That's
those
nuts.
exist.
And a lot of mothers go through
Yeah, and
postpartum,
that's
they're at
fine. They
risk
can
of harming
exist,
their
and yes,
own
maybe in
child.
those suboptimal situations, you can, have somebody come in order to regulate the child being raised. But in most situations, that is not the case, and there's nobody who's going to be better for the health and welfare of your children than you. Nobody's ever going to love them more than you.
Can I just ask again for clarification? Every single hand went up around the table when you said you wanted to get married theoretically someday. Who is looking forward to being a mom around the table or wants kids in some capacity?
High, please. Put them high.